around me are cars from the golden age of motoring, and you name it, one man here has done it all. Racing driver, car designer, and he's still the main man for Marcus Cars.
I've just spoken to him for the very first time, just before I spoke to you.
Well, you'd never met him before?
No, never met him before. Made my day, made my week.
Did it? Why?
Well, it's man behind the myth, isn't it?
Is there a myth? 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 Is there a myth?
This is a photograph of the Marsh family on the veranda of Cuckoo Paddock, Nentnet, near Blagdon. And this, of course, is the house that Grandfather Marsh built. In the foreground on the right is the late Jack Easton Smith, MC, TSO, etc., who was very famous during the war in the Long Range Desert Group. And the rest of the family are there as well, the parents of the rest of my cousins. I had my tonsils out the day war broke out, actually. When they came around and blacked out, hung up great curtains over the windows in case it's possible we're going to get bombed in Bristol. I was nine years old. And then, of course, after that, I was taken home, and I had a temperature, and the temperature wouldn't go down. They thought, in fact, that I had tuberculosis. And consequently, dear Grandfather Marsh, because I was in a tent in that very cold winter, bought this revolving wooden hut, which I was deposited in, and was made to drink boiled milk. And I stuck that out for about 10 months, actually. Quite a long time. I didn't go to school, of course. Everybody was very sorry for me and bought me presents. As it transpired, after about 10 or 11 months, I actually got out of the bed and went up the garden. And then, because it was snowing on a toboggan at Lower Hazel, and my temperature went down. So I was then packed off to school not long after that, but I did miss a year's schooling. I always blame that, of course, for my lack of academic qualifications. Went to Wycliffe into the preparatory school, which was at Stonehouse in Gloucestershire, a place called Windrush. And from there I then progressed into the junior school and then into the senior school. And from there at Wycliffe I concentrated on my woodwork and finished up with a huge examination qualification of a distinction in woodwork and a pass in English. What happened then was at that age, tender age, I decided, along with my father and uncle, etc., that it would be a good idea if I went for an interview for the Navy. Joined the Navy, I was sent down to HMS St Vincent. Bearing in mind in those days, the basic training for a boy seaman was a year. I mean, it was crazy, really. They do it in about 6 weeks now, I think. But one of my memories there, I suppose, first fearful memories, having to climb this wretched mast, 180 feet high. And, of course, he went up over the Devil's Elbow and then up the Jacob's Ladder, up onto the Crow's Nest, down the other side of the Jacob's Ladder, and down. And I tell you what, I used to shit plump blocks on that one. Because it was just so frightening, but we had to do it. I don't think it really did us any harm, but it was very tough. And of course, we did rowing and with whalers and all that sort of thing. I had my first draft chit to HMS Amethyst, which of course was the boat that went up the Yangtze and got shot up, and it was quite an exciting time. Unfortunately, when I got to Malta, they took me off the Amethyst draft chit because they decided I was too young. So I actually missed the Amethyst, and of course the medal I would have got as well. I was then put on HMS Chivalrous, okay, which is a destroyer, which you have a picture of it. But before I went out actually on the first to HMS Chivalrous, or before I left Plymouth, I met a leading seaman, Kennedy, who was in the field guns crew. That was a real tough job. And he said to me, what you want to do is take up photography. I bought a camera. I bought a Retina 1, and I took pictures everywhere we went. And I used to sell them to the ship's company. And what they call blank week, used to get paid fortnightly. So in their blank week, they hadn't got any money. I used to take the order for the photographs and give them the photographs, and then on payday stand outside the NAFI and collect the money off them. Went all around the Mediterranean, including down to the Gulf of Aqaba, where I nearly got my hand bitten off by a camel. This was in the desert. The Navy were very good. They used to take us to interesting things. So it was at the time the lost city of Petra had only been discovered. I think it was 26, so not many people had been there, and the only way you could get there was by an army truck, and then down to meet these Arabs in this Foreign Legion fort with a bundle of ponies. And it was awe-inspiring to come out into the open through this big narrow causeway. And of course I had my camera and I took lots of pictures. So that's how the photographic business went, which was very useful, really, and it gave me a bit of pocket money to buy motorbikes and charge around Malta. The first car I built was, in fact, during Foreign Service leave, and this was built at Newbury, outside Newbury. A lot of help was given me when building this car by my stepfather, Anton de la Rue, who was, in fact, an engineer. And having built the car and then using it, going backwards and forwards to my ship, and having got married for the first time to Barbara, went on honeymoon. During that time, Barbara was in Bath, and I had to go to a wedding at Bath Abbey, friends of hers. And on my way to Bath, I hit a lorry head-on in Radstock. It didn't do the car a lot of good, and didn't do me a lot of good either. But all I can remember is waking up in hospital with my father with a bottle of beer hid in the cupboard away from the nurses, and that I had an internal hemorrhage, a broken right leg, and generally pretty well shaken up. So the car was rebuilt. While I was rebuilding it, I was approached by the local 750 club to come to have a look at I joined the club by then, of course, and they came down with their Austin 7s, parked in a row outside the Red Lion at Wolverton. I was cajoled into going to my first race, and off I went for my first motor race in 1954 at Silverstone in the 3-hour relay race. In the race I spun on the first lap, or second lap I think it was, but it was pouring with rain, and I managed to keep the car going. In fact, of the 3 hours I think I did something like 2.5 hours, because the rest of the cars blew up. And that was then, of course, my start of my racing and special building career. I raced that car for the whole of that season, and in 56, was it? Yes, 56, I won the 750 Premier Awards 750 Motor Club Goodacre Trophy with another car that I built. I was approached by another person to join the Hollywood Motor Maniacs, which in fact he was a second-hand car dealer in Plymouth called Jerry Scally. He got this team together, and part of the team involved myself and my Austin 7 Special. Being a stunt team, and the only stunt teams really which were well known worldwide were Americans, so we decided that we'd all give ourselves funny names. I was called Rod Marsh, and my title, my job was overtaking the hard way. Of course, I used to come up behind this Ford Pilot with the two ramps on, accelerate up over the top, down the other side, while of course the other car was going along underneath, and that's why it was called overtaking the hard way. To make it interesting, we bought a Ford V8 Pilot soft top, put two ramps over it, and then I used to drive the 750 Special over the top of the Ford Pilot while it was going along. We had a trapeze in the middle, swinging on with a girl on the swing, and I had to stop on the top of the Ford Pilot if I could. Had a job sometimes, just to grab the side rails and stamp on the brakes, and she used to get into the passenger seat, and then I had to take her off down the ramps. Bearing in mind the car, of course, is underneath is still moving along, so it was all quite exciting, and it was a good experience. We went right around the country, and we finished up north somewhere in a stadium. But the first Marcos that was produced in 1959, and this came about by me actually meeting a fellow called Frank Costin, because he was a guy that designed the van wall body and applied aerodynamics to cars, which of course now is the thing that everybody talks about all the time. He was way ahead of his time. And he mentioned that he'd built in his garden a wooden chassis car, wooden bodied car. And obviously with my huge scholastic qualifications, one of which was being woodwork, about the only one, I obviously latched onto this a bit quickly and said, well, that sounds interesting, Frank. So I had in my front room, in the garage, I had some Triumph suspension, which I was going to build a single seater at the time, and we did a deal for him to produce a wooden prototype, and under my direction to use certain parts which he had to use. And off he went to Dolgestley, and up in a car park in Dolgestley in a lock-up stable, the Marcos was born. It was known as the Marcos 1000cc GT, but in fact, because it was so ugly, it was nicknamed by the press the Ugly Duckling. It was the same Ugly Duckling which Jackie Stewart, of course, drove on the Scottish circuits, and of course won races and sprints with it.
Have you got any fears of the Death Watch beetle?
All these jokes are being cracked time and time again, and I quite honestly we get a little sick of it, but I assure you that the wood is treated specially.
Frank was making these cars up in North Wales, which was a dreadful place to work because you couldn't buy a wood screw and couldn't get anything. And we employed Dennis and Peter Adams. Peter was a qualified woodworker, and Dennis was a welder, and they of course joined the company, and Frank then started messing around with boats, making single sail boats and what have you. He was an incredible chap, but he couldn't stick to one thing. He had to go on to something else. He got tired of it, in other words, so he went on and did his boats. So I realized that this is hopeless, so I moved the manufacturing of the Marcos down to Luton. In the meantime, various things happened to Marcos. One thing or another, we stopped making it, and it all got into trouble, and we unscrambled all that. And I met Greville Cavendish, who lived in Freshford, near Bath, and we moved the manufacturing of the Marcos down to Greenland Mills in Bradford-on-Avon. He came along and financed the operation down at Greenland Mills in Bradford-on-Avon. And it was there that we decided we ought to do something different. So Dennis drew, literally almost on the back of an envelope, the classic shape of the car as we all know it now, and he drew that in 1963. So the basic shape of the vehicle stayed the same all those years, and various models have been built with various engines, finishing up, of course, with the Rover V8.
I love the shape of the Marcos, this beautiful shape. It's 25 years old, and it's something they can really never get rid of. And remember, it was Marcos that gave Jackie Stewart his start in racing. He started racing a Marcos many years ago, and even Derek Bell has raced a Marcos as well in his time.
OK, she's a nice old girl, but why not a brand spanking new sex machine of a car, the 2003 model?
This is a sexy model. This is the one with the nice lines.
The car that I first went around in really was a bird puller, you know. I mean, it was, everybody looked at it. I always remember being totally big-headed, driving past big plate glass windows and looking to the left when you're on the left-hand side, and looking at yourself sitting in this sexy thing, you know. And God, this is bloody magic. And then all the people on the pavement stopping and looking at you and saying, what is it, Monsieur, a Ferrari? You say, no, it's a British sports car, very smoothly, of course, and half of them never believed you anyway. When it was launched at the Racing Car Show in '64, it was amazing, absolutely amazing, the oohs and ahs we got. You know, people couldn't really understand the shape. Sons of wealthy people who fathers bought them a Marcos because they had to have one. I mean, that's who you were selling them to, but, you know, there was all sorts of problems with that because they had too much money, they couldn't get insurance, and they were hooligan drivers who used to crash them, etc. Yeah, well, the Mini Marcos was a phenomenon, really. I mean, we made this, made the whole thing out of fiberglass, which nobody done before, which was in fact originally my idea. There were lots of these made, and they were very successful. They ran at Le Mans, they finished at Le Mans with French drivers, and they drove at Nürburgring and all over Europe. And of course, they were ideal for a young chap who wanted to build his own car, because he only had to buy an old rusty Mini, throw away the body, which was rusty, and use all the mechanical parts which were all bolted onto the Mini Marcos.
A lot of people would say, why haven't you grown out of it? Why are you still the Peter Pan of sports car making?
Well, Pete, I haven't heard that one before. In '71, the company folded up, and the assets were bought by another group. And over the sort of months following this, I finished up with the assets back again, because the original company bought it were in trouble, big motor group. And then, of course, I had to resurrect it again from scratch, basically. Just carry on, yeah, various people being involved. And of course, I don't have the name anymore now. It's been sold on, and it's now owned by a Canadian. I handed it over to him, and then, of course, he wanted me to retire, which is what I did. And he's now running it in this country. So it's still being made in Brit with an American engine, which is the original engine which I engineered and put in for the Le Mans car when we finished Le Mans in '94.
15 years and not a grey hair in sight.
I know, it is rather like living with a human dynamo, I have to say.
V8 engine.
It can be very wearing. You know, we do lead a full life, both of us. I mean, but we work as a team, which is important.
Mm-hmm. But is it not like a roller coaster, the ups and downs?
It wouldn't be us if it wasn't like that, I don't think. You know, I think we've got used to it now. I don't think I can compete with the car.
Something you created, you don't want to see it disappear, do you? Just keep on. You can't just give it up.